Get in on the secret. September is one of the best times to visit the Boardwalk Plaza Hotel in Rehoboth Beach. The weather is grand, and just steps from the sand, you can relax and experience the convenience of their oceanfront location right on the Rehoboth Beach Boardwalk. Enjoy Victoria's Restaurant, the charming Plaza Pub and room service. Visit boardwalkplaza.com and book your perfect getaway today, or call 800-33-BEACH for fast, friendly assistance. Thanks to the Boardwalk Plaza for being the Bridge Podcast Network sponsor.
The question on everyone's minds: did Jesus build a tiny volcano when he was in his schooling?
It's what the people want to know, Mark. It's what the people want to know.
Why do Christians deny science? We're talking about it today. I'm Mark Dickey.
And I'm already regretting my decision to do this episode. Burt Miller!
This is the Why Do Christians podcast. Hey, welcome to the show. My name is Mark Dickey. I host the afternoon show on the Bridge radio station. My co-host is Pastor Burt Miller from Solid Ground Church. Burt, how are you today?
Mark Hawking Dickey.
That's a good
one.
Doing
great. Thanks.
That's a good one.
Yeah, that is your middle name.
No.
Oh.
No.
Well, it could have been.
No.
You're sure now?
I'm certain.
You know, science would dictate that we test this theory.
I have a hypothesis.
Yeah, that's right.
And I'm pretty sure you're wrong.
Okay. Well, we'll see.
So the big question today: why do Christians deny science? Can we just get out there real quick and say they don't?
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for the clickbait.
Now,
no, but a lot of people would have you believe you have to choose one or the other.
Yeah.
And remember that commercial? Was it tortilla chips? It was like, why not both? What was that commercial?
I don't know, but you remember the show Lost? Remember that? There was John Locke and he had that line where he said, like the difference between you and me, Jack, is that you're a man of science and I'm a man of faith.
Yeah.
I think, but no, you have to know that we don't deny science. What we deny is what we would call secular humanism that poses as science. Like that's what Christians have a hard time with. Basically, when people take a worldview that is, nature is all that there is, what is seen is all that there is, and all that can be trusted, and then pose that as science, that is itself a religion. It's a belief system, right? So, if we were to take the formation of the universe, right? It takes just as much faith, I would argue more, to say that all of it came from nothing by itself than agency of a creator. And so what Christians have a hard time with, it's not science. We have a hard time when a worldview is presented as science, when that may not be the case, or when science is given the place of religion where people say that it can determine meaning. When science observes, it can't do that. That's when we have a hard time with it.
I promise you, I saw this in either a history book or a science book when I was in middle school, maybe it was high school, but that the reason the sciences were formed was an act of worship.
Many of them, yes.
So that we could figure out how God did it.
Yeah. There's this popular belief, and it is a false belief, that Christians have been the opponents of science throughout history, right? So you could think about there's stories. Oh man, Copernicus, who made the bold claim that the Earth revolves around the sun and not the sun around the Earth, and that the church was against him. We know that is just factually inaccurate. Like I've got here actually in front of me a letter that Nicholas, I want to say Schonberg is how you say his name. I'm not German, but he was a cardinal in the church. He actually wrote to Copernicus when Copernicus's studies were being released. He says, "I've also learned that you've written an exposition of this whole system of astronomy and have computed to planetary motions and set them down in tables to the greatest admiration of all. Therefore, listen to this, with utmost earnestness, I entreat you." I'm asking you, most learned sir, unless I inconvenience you, to communicate this discovery of yours to scholars, at the earliest possible moment and to send me your writings on the sphere of the universe together with the tables and whatever else you have that's relevant to this subject. In other words, get what you're saying out there. Let people know about it. That's amazing. Yeah, you can think of like Louis Pasteur, right? The father of so many medical things, vaccines and what have you. He read the Gospels and was inspired by Jesus healing and said, I want to heal like Jesus does. So this belief that somehow science is at ends with faith. No, you're exactly right. So many of them were formed because people looked at how they believed God himself had made the world, made the universe, and they wanted to observe it.
Yeah. So why do we have this, like, it's gotta be this or it's gotta be this? Like, why do we have to argue about this?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there isn't a simple answer to that, but sometimes I think what happens is we're taught a version of Christianity that I would argue is not historical nor biblical, that places us in a situation where we have to choose either I trust the scriptures or I trust what people are telling me. So I think of, probably the most famous example would be right now, like the big contemporary debate thing that's happening would be origins of mankind, evolution, right? I am not a proponent of evolution. Cards on the table. I'm a literal Genesis 1 guy. I believe the earth was created in 6 days and that God rested on the seventh. But folks who are in the faith disagree with me on that. But what happens is people are basically told that the Bible, almost like it's a house of cards. So like if you take one story out, the whole thing comes crumbling. And it's not even so much like taking it out. It's that if you don't take a literal reading of Genesis 1, it means that you're either not truly a Christian or you're compromising with the world in some way. And there are groups that have a very, very dogmatic viewpoint, which is the earth has to be this age and the earth has to have been created in this way. And usually they're responding to the humanist evolution viewpoint, which is, hey, like I said, there are different degrees of what evolution is, right? So some people, they say evolution, and what they mean is what's called macroevolution, which is all life came from one thing, some simple organisms evolved. And others, they mean microevolution, which would be mutation, right? So like, most famously with there were Darwin's finches, right? Like here's these birds on an island. They're different depending on how the food source is, right? And that would be microevolution. Although, I'm not saying Darwin did not believe in macro, but regardless, what people are told is that, like, no, the earth has to be this age and it has to be a literal reading of Genesis 1. And again, I affirm Genesis 1. Okay, like I affirm a literal reading. That is where I am. But it's a mistake to believe that if a person views Genesis 1 as allegorical, they're not a Christian. And the reason I say that is because as long as there have been Christians have disagreed about reading Genesis 1 in terms of like what it means. So like people who have this very, very firm viewpoint of, you're not being true to the faith if you wonder if Genesis 1 is being symbolic, they'll say that, like, no, that's a newer idea. Only no, it's not. History attests to that. So just to kind of give a little framework for it, there's this passage that the early church fathers would reference in 2 Peter 3:8, where Peter says, "But do not forget this one thing, dear friends, with the Lord, a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years are like a day," right? And so they took that and they would wonder, okay, like we know that Genesis 1, like in Genesis 3 onwards, written like a standard narrative or there's a story happening, but in Genesis 1, there's all this like repetition. Like, is it poetry? Is it not? Is it symbolic? Is it not? Again, I think it's literal, but Christians, as long as there have been Christians, just sort of engage with the text in that way. So like, I'm thinking about, like, for instance, there was a guy named Justin Martyr, who early church father, he writes about 155 AD. Okay. And he actually says this, he says, this is in his dialogue with Trypho. He says, "For as Adam was told that in the day he ate of the tree, he would die, we know that he did not complete 1,000 years. We have perceived, moreover, that the expression, the day of the Lord is as 1,000 years, is connected with this subject." Meaning, so like, he's looking at the creation story is being like, okay, but is it a physical day or is it 1,000-year span, right? And Justin Martyr isn't alone in that. There was a guy named Irenaeus who was a early church bishop. He writes this in 189 AD in his book called Against Heresies. He says, there are some again who relegate the death of Adam to the 1,000th year. For since a day of the Lord is as 1,000 years, he did not overstep the 1,000 years, but died within them, thus bearing out the sentence of his sin. I mean, we could talk about others. We could talk about Origen of Antioch. We could talk about Clement of Alexandria. Most notable, there's an early church father named St. Augustine who is just instrumental in how we do biblical scholarship, theology. Augustine actually, he said, listen, the Genesis 1 story, it's symbolic because he goes, I think what happened was that God created it all at once in one moment, and all the different days are different like angles looking at the same event. I say all this to say the following, that it's not, hey, I believe Genesis 1 is literal or I'm not a Christian. Those are not the same thing. And Christians, as long as there have been Christians, have disagreed on this. And so I say this for like the kid, who goes to school. Maybe they grew up, they went to Christian school or they were homeschooled, and they go off to you hear the story of they go to a secular university and they're told like here's all this evidence for evolution, and whether that's credible or not is a whole different conversation.
Yeah.
And they're told, listen, here's like we have it in front of us. Your faith doesn't work. And so they just leave the entire faith because they were told it's either all or nothing with that. And what I'm saying is the way they're being told that isn't fair to the experience of Christians over 2,000 years. Again, I'm not for taking stories out of the Bible and ignoring them. I'm not for saying like, also, it doesn't matter what happened. No, it matters because we're dealing with God creating the world. But what I would say is that our faith does not rise and fall on a literal reading of Genesis 1. Our faith rises and falls on the literality of the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. According to the scriptures in 1 Corinthians, if that happened, be a Christian, and if it didn't, don't. Mm-hmm. So don't, I would say to our listeners, don't feel as though you have to choose between faith or science. It doesn't work that way. Yeah.
And something that we bring up frequently on the podcast is there's close-handed beliefs and open-handed.
Yes. Can you explain that for us?
Yeah. And I think it was the resurrection, why we believe in Easter, that if Jesus didn't die and rise from the dead, like Christianity falls apart.
Yes.
That's a closed belief, and think of a closed hand, like you're holding on to this belief.
Yeah.
It can't go anywhere.
Yeah, if you don't have this, you're not a Christian.
Right.
Yeah, the Trinity would be another one.
But an open-handed belief is something that it doesn't really matter. You're better at explaining this than I am.
No, I think you got it right.
It doesn't.
It's not that it doesn't matter. It's that we can disagree.
You can let it go. You can let this belief go. It can blow away in the wind and be replaced with a different one. Because it's not going to it's not a load-bearing wall in your faith.
Yeah, like so for instance, an open-handed belief, like can we disagree on this and still be Christians? I would say that like we did an episode on different spiritual gifts, right? Like so Christians disagree about what gifts are still active or not. I think a person who disagrees with me on, like, I take the viewpoint that all gifts are still continuing. If somebody disagrees with me on that, I would still consider them, that would be a deal breaker. They would still, to me, be my brother or sister in the Lord because it's an open-handed issue. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when it comes to Genesis 1, I would say that the interpretation of Genesis 1 is an open-handed issue.
Right. The open-handed is that interpretation. Close-handed would be God created it.
Yeah.
Like God made the earth and everything around us. How he did it, how long it took him to do it, that's open-handed.
Yeah.
We don't need to have that set in stone to believe that there's a God who loves you and he sent his son to die for you.
Yes.
Something that you got me thinking about while we're talking about all this and why the question has to be asked, why do Christians deny science? it's almost like the scientific community as a whole is so against Christians,
right,
that we just have to go, well, we don't like you either.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point. Like, I have friends who are well within the scientific community who are outspoken Christians who view, like what you were talking about earlier, like they view their profession as a means of worship to God. I'm thinking of a woman who used to be in our church, and she moved up north to Massachusetts, where her thing was, she was studying microbiology and all kinds of stuff like that. And she was saying, like, when I look at cells, when I look at this, when I look at that, I can't help but worship the Lord because of the complexity that it takes for these to exist. And knowing that God made that when he made us, it's astounding to me. And so, but what happens though is you get folks who, they can be smug, right? Who maybe they are humanists, maybe they're atheists, but they're also scientists. And what they can do is they can insult your intelligence if you don't take their viewpoint, because they've skewed the data in a way that they try to support their own worldview. It's not the data; it's their worldview presented through a manipulation of data, and so that they can take cheap shots and what have you at those with faith, and so those with faith react vehemently, and exactly what you're saying right now. Like, well, if that's what you think, well, then this is what we're gonna do. That's not correct either. The correct thing to do is just go, okay, like your personal insult towards me does not dictate truth. Truth dictates truth. Okay, this is what you say, but here's why what you're saying can't be true. Here's why what you're saying, famous example would be Dr. Carl Sagan, who a famous scientist back in the 70s, who believed that the universe was eternal. Like, he believed that the universe had no beginning and it had no end. And he was, famously quoted as saying, the cosmos is all that there ever was and all that there ever will be. Okay, well, that's not a viewpoint that any scientist takes, or most, I should say, I'm sure there's like somebody who does, but the prevailing viewpoint now within the popular scientific theories of origins of the universe. And again, we can disagree here, but a popular one would be the Big Bang Theory, right? Like, that's kind of like, which by the way, the person who coined that was a Jesuit priest. But what Big Bang Theory says is, all right, there was a moment when the universe like exploded into existence. Whether you agree with that or not, I'm not going there. But like, just that is, it went from a viewpoint of the universe is this own self-sustaining thing to the universe had a beginning. Now, those of us of the faith, we say, all right, if you believe that the universe had a beginning, and again, dating it, all that stuff, like, again, we're not going there. I'm just saying, like hypothetically, if you believe it has a beginning, then you have to ask, what is the first cause? And this is where people start to become uncomfortable if they take the humanist viewpoint, because like, if there is a first cause, it always has to go back to something. It has to go back to a beginner, right? And so even within popular science right now, I think you are seeing this shift. And I'm not a scientist; I'm a minister, but I am seeing this shift where it seems like the prevailing theory actually we can leverage to talk about faith, even if you don't agree with the theory. Like, because what you can say to somebody is, look, okay, well, if that's what you believe, you've got a bigger problem. That is, you have to explain the origin of the universe. If the universe just always existed, well, then you don't have to deal with the idea of is there a God or not. But if you say the universe has a beginning, you got some accounting to do.
Right.
Yeah.
And you think of it like kind of the reverse too. Like, somebody said to me, if I die and that's it, now we're talking about sort of about heaven, what happens after my experience in the universe. If I die and that's it, then what have I lost? Because if there is no beginner, if there is no maker,
right,
if there is no life after death, then everything we do here, no matter how great it is, no matter how many rocket ships we build to explore the cosmos, if somebody figures out how to make people live for 1,000 years, it doesn't matter. If you're just going to die and that's the end and there's nothing, then none of it matters.
Yeah.
There's no feat that humans can accomplish that makes it matter.
Yeah.
If we all just die and it's over.
Yeah.
And so, like, I know that's not in scripture, and it's not not scientific, it's not anything, but if there's nothing beyond the experience here on this planet or in this universe, then
well, no, but like, here's the thing. Okay, let's say you take a humanist viewpoint and you take a belief that this is all that there is. Okay, I mean, I'm going to playfully just poke at that. Okay, based on what you can observe, we know that things don't just go away, right? You have a human body that passes the way the body decays, the cells, they go somewhere else, right? That's true also with energy, like matter, right? Like just that is okay. Why would you assume that the human consciousness would be any different? So if everything that we know of that exists doesn't go away, it just moves somewhere else, why would you assume that the human consciousness and awareness ceases to be when a body ceases to be here? If everything else is moved, and like further to the point, just to go against this sort of humanist viewpoint, like and when we talked about earlier about like they say this smug thing and it takes shots at us or whatever. I think atheist comedians are great at doing this. It's sort of presenting it as though you're kind of an idiot unless you believe this thing. Most notably, probably one of the most outspoken atheist comedians would be Ricky Gervais, right? Ricky Gervais, creator of The Office, or one of the creators of The Office. I've heard him say in multiple interviews, he'd be like, why do I not believe in religion? He'd say, well, if all of science were to go away, eventually we would rediscover it all and be right where we are because it's unquestionable, right? So like if everything that we know about how the world works, just like all that knowledge was forgotten, we would eventually work it back out, right? He goes, but if you do that with God or Jesus, it doesn't come back. And that sounds like a gotcha until you realize how stupid of a statement that is. And the reason that's stupid is because he's equating workings of creation with personhood. Any person who let's take Abraham Lincoln. Okay, we know Abraham Lincoln existed. Like we know that. Okay, if we lost all documentation of Abraham Lincoln, would Abraham Lincoln still have existed?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, of course. And so the same way, if we were to lose all knowledge of Jesus of Nazareth, like would he have still? Yes, he would have. And let's just take a second, by the way, to take pause that there are so many names from the first century in Judea that are lost to history, and yet this guy is completely different, never lost to history, the most documented figure in history, whose life is so exceptional that multiple biographies were produced about it within decades of his life, which was unheard of in that world. And so like it's apples and oranges. It sounds really smart until you realize how dumb it is. And I bring that up to say, like, what happens is Christians can hear those types of things and just, in a reactionary standpoint, pivot away and just go, well, then forget all science. And that's also wrong. Just like let's let truth be truth. Like if something is true, we don't have to be afraid of it because it's true. But if it's not, it'll be found out.
Burt, I feel like this episode is yet another fire hose episode where you can bring up the topic and we've got 20, 30, 40 minutes to discuss it. And even with educated thoughts and opinions, like we could still run out of time and not cover it all. And I don't know that this episode needs a part 2. But just the fact that it's been debated as long as it's been a thing. Yeah. Because there's just a lot that you can differ on, and it's kind of an open hand belief like we talked about earlier.
Sure.
And it's just really interesting. You've had so many great points about this, and every time you say something, I go, "Ooh, that reminds me of this. Oh, that reminds me of that."
Yeah.
And I bet we could talk for about 4 hours about this and still not be done.
One thing. Let me just. I know we're nearing our end here, but I would just want to say really quick, because what I would hate for somebody who's listening to hear from me saying, so maybe you're listening to this and you are not a Christian. You don't approach the world with a theistic or belief in God mindset. And so when I said it at the beginning, hey, I believe in like a literal reading of Genesis 1, maybe you instantly checked out. And the reason you did was you went, okay, well, look, this guy clearly, he doesn't believe evidence in front of him. Like he's just shown himself to be, closed-minded or what have you. And I would just want to clarify this exact thing. I'm not a Christian because of how I read Genesis 1. I'm a Christian because of Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. Like what you want to believe about the universe and its origins, those do not make or break my faith. The evidence for or against evolution or not, the evidence that I think does make or break my faith that's painfully in front of me is the evidence for the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. I think the evidence is really, really strong. And in fact, I would encourage you to read a couple books. One would be The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. There's another one called Cold Case Christianity. I think that's a really great one.
Wasn't Case for Christ, wasn't he an atheist trying to prove?
Yeah, he was an atheist journalist for the Chicago Tribune and set out to disprove Christianity because his wife converted and ended up converting in the process as he researched it. Another one would be Evidence That Demands a Verdict by McDowell. I would say to you that I take the view on Genesis 1 that I do because of my reading of other places in Scripture and how I believe Jesus treated those subjects. Now, people disagree with me on that, but my faith does not rise and fall on that. And so if you're hearing this from me and you're hearing it like, oh, he doesn't care about evidence, I do, but the evidence that I care about is not in the wheelhouse that you're looking for. And I would say that to you. The thing that will make you or break you is, did Jesus rise from the dead? If he did, be a Christian. And there's all kinds of space for what you do with the other stuff after that. But if he didn't, don't. And it would be easier for you to engage obscure topics that don't make or break the faith, to sort of hide behind them. Well, I can't believe in God because, here's a story of an ark or this. The ark doesn't make or break the faith. Again, I believe in the ark. Okay. Mm-hmm. What makes or breaks it is the death and resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth. So if you're really going to be intellectually honest with yourself and you're really going to say, I know this religion is not true, you owe it to yourself to research that specific event. And if you can come away from the research done on that and say it didn't happen, okay. But until you're willing to grapple with that, the conversation even can't be had.
You just got me thinking. Have you seen that picture? It's of like a bird. It's like a woodpecker with a chipmunk on the back of it.
No, what?
It's like a real photograph of a bird flying with like a chipmunk on the back of it. Mm-hmm. And it's like, if you told me that, I would not believe you, except there's photographic evidence. And it just got me thinking about, maybe this story in the Bible is pretty out there. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. Mm. And just because you can't in 2024 or whatever year you're listening to this, make it work, you can't make the numbers work, it doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Yeah.
I'm going to find out later on that photo was
photoshopped.
And somebody's going to be like, nope, I did the, what's the fact checking website? Snopes.
Yeah. I asked Jeeves and said, say, Mark, what do they do if they've got a question for the show?
Yes, you can send your questions to podcast@wearethebridge.org, and we very well might have raised some new questions for you on the topic, and maybe there is a follow-up episode with maybe a specific direction from today's episode. We'd love to hear your questions, hear your thoughts. podcast at wearethebridge.org. Be sure to put Why Do Christians in the subject of the email, just so that it gets to us for sure, because there's a bunch of podcasts on the network. But we really appreciate you diving into science, and we still don't know if Jesus did any science fair projects when he was a little Jewish boy.
I'm going to go with probably not.
Yeah.
So we answered that question. Okay, great.
We did.
Great.
We did.
Okay. Thanks for listening.